module, the Physiology of Pilot Error. This segment is going to be about 20 minutes long, then you can take a break and then continue with part 2 at your leisure. At the end of this module, you can exit, log into your personal account, and take the short test if you need credit for this course. This seminar is going to help you understand how your diet, lifestyle, and the environment influences the way your brain processes information, and how it can go on vacation at times, resulting in a lack of judgment and a breakdown in your ability to properly control the airplane or helicopter. The Physiology of Pilot Error is brought to you courtesy of fabulousflying.com. This is a really neat networking site for aviators, and we hope that you will visit it often. And the first aircraft accident, even though this wasn't really attributed to pilot error, it actually was the very first aircraft accident. It was in 1908 when Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge was killed in the plane piloted by Orville Wright. The accident was caused by a propeller separation, so even though it wasn't pilot error, it did make a lot of publicity. Nothing much has changed. We still have aircraft accidents. This one was very well publicized, and Jessica Dubroff was a teenager who was taking a transcontinental record attempt along with her instructor and her father. And unfortunately, the instructor made the wrong decision to take off into bad weather, which resulted in a stall and a crash and killed them all. Definitely pilot error. We have this slide because we say, what weather? Would you cause a pilot error accident by taking off into this weather, thinking that, oh, maybe we could get around it, or maybe it was VFR in the other direction? Just think about that. This one should have never happened, okay? This is the 747 Singapore Airlines airplane, and they actually were taking off on a closed runway. That wasn't bad enough. They were taking off during a typhoon, which in the Eastern Hemisphere is called a hurricane. They crashed into the construction equipment on the runway, and they killed 83 of the 179 aboard. Definitely pilot error. Now this one was really sad too. This was, we call it the really stupid award, I guess. There were 11 Marines packed into a Black Hawk Army helicopter, and what they were doing was doing demonstrations for visiting dignitaries to see how the troops were sped into battle and how great the helicopter was. Well, they loaded the Marines in the back of the helicopter, and the Marine said, hey, to the pilot, hey, fly hard, give these guys a real show. So they took off, and they did a lot of really neat maneuvers, you know, lots of steep turns and swooping and diving and whatever. And then the pilot decided to give his passengers a weightless experience. Now, all of us have done that in an airplane. You know, you pull the airplane up, and then you push it over, and you end up, for that few seconds, becoming weightless. Unfortunately, there was a loose chock in the cabin of the helicopter. It flew forward, jammed the controls, and this is what you see. The crew chief sitting in the door was killed, and the $6 million helicopter was destroyed, right in view of all the visiting dignitaries. Definitely an accident that didn't have to happen. And this is one picture which we keep telling Southwest that there are such things as fuel trucks, and they don't have to go to the gas station. But this was a repetitive thing with them. They kept running off the runway in snow at Midway. Definitely pilot error, and I guess they must have learned, or the airline must have really got on their case, because we haven't heard about one of these in a long time. Human factors that build accidents. Right, these are some of the things that we find do build accidents, and you can think of how they apply to you personally. Complacency, ego, never had that happen before, a lack of situational experience, passenger pressure, get-home-itis, we won't die, fatigue, which is not just the lack of sleep, but it's also a concern for the glycemic roller coaster, which we'll talk about in a minute. Stress, anxiety, diet, dehydration, and the lack of electrolytes, not just lack of water. Mental capacity affected by chemical fume exposure, drugs, alcohol, smoking, and some others. Now this is a picture of how your brain works, all right? We say that pilot error can be attributed to a lot of factors, but basically most of you know how to fly, you know the emergency procedures, you know your airplane really well, you've practiced, but somehow something doesn't connect when you need it, and you don't make the right decision. The brain it works like there's a little neuron in there, and that sends an outgoing message down an axon, which is a long nerve fiber, down to a sack of chemicals called neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters put the spark out and the message through the synapses. You end up getting a return through the receptors and the dendrites back to the neurons. Now this is really great as long as it works, as long as all those parts are intact. But suppose something happens in your body, whether it's diet, chemical fumes, stress, an accident, where this system is interrupted. Do you think you're going to be able to get the message from point A to point B to do what you're supposed to do when you want to? And of course the answer is no. A brain on vacation pranks airplanes. Now what causes pilots' brains to make the wrong decision? Look at these for a second, and then we'll give you the answer on the next page. It is not all of them, so check them out. Okay, you guys all finished? Here are the answers. Lack of sleep, prescription drugs, alcohol, irate passenger. Yeah, you can probably pretty well think about those. Candy bar, you may not have known that. And dehydration, which you probably all know, but you don't know what it is about dehydration that causes your brain to go on vacation. All of these affect the brain. And since the brain is our primary instrument for indecision making, not decision making, but indecision making, we really have to address each one of these things. Dehydration. You can live a lot longer without food than you can without water. Now why? Okay, the body is made up mostly of 75% water. The brain needs water to be able to function because it needs to be hydrated. But the brain is like the battery in your car or your airplane. It needs a spark to be able to function. That spark is caused by electrolyte-forming minerals. Now, when you drink bottled or filtered water, which is most of the water that you buy in FBOs, it has the minerals filtered out of it. So therefore, you're not getting electrolytes. It's sort of dead water. Unless you're getting a really good mineral water, you're not getting the spark that's going to be able to make the brain function properly. So you need to put back in that spark. Years ago, we found a product called Electroblast, and I'm sure you can Google that. And it's basically electrolyte concentrate that you just carry in your flight bag, and whenever you get water on the road, you just squirt this into your water bottle, drink it, and now that's going to help the brain spark. Without the spark, you're going to short circuit, and you're actually going to not be able to process the information that you want to get when you need it. The Kennedy crash, I'm sure you all have gone over and over and over this, and everybody probably has their own opinion on, what he didn't do that caused him to crash. There were quite a few true items that, you probably have heard of, but there's one particular that caused his brain to go on vacation, so he couldn't make the right decision. Okay, he had a failing business, we all know that. We had a wedding you can't be late for, a late rush departure. He didn't have his instructor go with him, who volunteered. Did not use the autopilot at the time he was losing control of the airplane, or at least that's what they surmised. He had a near miss with an airliner over White Plains, but he might not have known that, but the airliner knew. The big thing is all of these things, besides the fact he had an ego, he could have been personality that is an accident waiting to happen, but he didn't have the faculties. His brain wasn't working properly, so he could not process the information that was coming into him to make a really good, sound, safe decision. All he had all day was a banana and a little water. He didn't have electrolyte water, just plain old water. So his brain was short-circuiting. His brain was sending out information, but it wasn't getting the right feedback. So he couldn't make an educated decision. If he had been properly nourished and properly hydrated, maybe he would have taken the instructor. Maybe he would have at least put the autopilot back on and called center and said, I need help. And he might be alive today. So you really have to realize that no matter what stupid mistakes you make, it could be something that's physical inside your body, and you have an ability to correct that. Okay, here's a film scenario. We're going to look at this. This is an ego thing. We're going to see if this is you.
I could fly my plane with my eyes shut. There's nobody who can tell me about that plane.
My business meeting went way over. Man, if I don't get home tonight, though, my wife's going to have a cow. I know the weather's getting kind of bad and it's getting kind of dark, but I already filed and my autopilot knows the way.
Weather? What weather? I checked the radar report. It's nothing I can handle. It's only a thunderstorm.
You know, Joan gets all the good trips. I only get the ones with the screaming babies and the white-knuckle flyers. She must be sucking up to management.
Every time I fly 02 extra, the radios go out. You think they do something about that? I guess I'm just a lucky pilot who gets a crappy airplane every time.
Multitask? You think you can multitask? Yesterday, I was threading my way through some clouds, programming my GPS, listening to XM music, and answering questions from the passengers back all the time I was talking to center.
Okay, you can think a little bit about if that is any of you. Now we're going to go into diet a little bit. Pick what you'd eat before flying. Would you take a turkey sandwich with salad, iced tea, and an apple for dessert? That sounds like a pretty healthy meal, and it is, as long as the iced tea does not have sugar in it, and you understand that the turkey sandwich, if it has a lot of turkey in it, turkey has an amino acid that causes you to sort of want to go to sleep, which is very similar to what happens after Thanksgiving dinner. So you just have to take that into consideration. The hamburger on a bun with cheese, french fries, soft drinks, and ice cream, the all-American diet. It's not good for your health, but it's also not good for flying because the bun usually has sugar in it, the soft drink has sugar in it, the ice cream has sugar in it, and the french fries have a lot of starch, which is also a sugar. So even though you may feel full for a little while, 15 minutes later, as you're going to hear about in a minute, you'll be on the backside of the glycemic roller coaster and you're going to get tired. Bag of chips and a power bar, that's what you usually have in a vending machine in an FBO. Power bars usually got sugar in it because they're not the best kind there. So, if you have to have something, at least you have to eat it. But, better thing is to try to pack some snacks that are healthier. An apple and a banana, some sports water, that's a really good snack. The apple and the banana will give you a little sugar, but it's more of a natural sugar, and it won't put you in the backslide of the glycemic roller coaster as much. And the sports water, especially if it has electrolytes in it and no sugar, it will be really good for you too. Okay, here's some dietary considerations we're going to talk about. Sweeteners, heavy meals or not eating, high carbohydrate snacks, allergic foods, and indigestion. Okay, the sweeteners, glycemic roller coaster, we've mentioned a couple of times. What we're going to tell you is that the glycemic roller coaster has something to do with your body's blood sugar. All right, when you eat sugar or high carbs, you're going to feel really energized for a short period of time. Then your body's going to say, uh-oh, sugar's gone out, our false sense of stamina is gone away, and I feel tired and I feel hungry. I need another sugar fix. So unless you constantly eat a candy bar every 15-20 minutes, you're going to start being down on the backside of this power curve, energy-wise. And it could definitely affect your thinking and your ability to handle an emergency if it happens. So what you need to do is realize you need to eat foods that are going to sustain you, such as more protein foods, things like celery or an apple or a power bar without the sugar, something that's going to sustain you without putting you on that backside of that glycemic roller coaster 15 minutes later. And so you say, okay, well, I'll take a sugar substitute. A lot of people do that. They substitute sugar-free. Well, watch out, because most sugar-free drinks and most sugar-free cookies or breads or candy bars contain a neurotoxin. And neuro means brain, and toxin means not good for you. So if you have this neurotoxin floating around, do you think it's going to sustain your brain's ability to process information? Probably not. A little bit, once in a while, if you take a little bit, it's probably not going to hurt you. But if you're addicted to diet sodas, you're going to have long-term possible side effects and not be able to think properly. Now, some of the confirmed side effects you see listed here, the one that most people get first is headaches if they're sensitive to aspartame. You may not get these if, it's an individual thing, but it still is a neurotoxin. Even if you don't get the symptoms, you may be having a little bit of a brain going on vacation because of this. Now, eat a lot or not much, okay, as we saw with Kennedy, he had a banana. That's only good for short term, and you really need to nourish your body in order to nourish your brain. If you eat a ton of food, you're going to get tired because the body has to digest all of that food, and it's going to make it tired. If you don't eat much, your blood sugar is going to drop, and you're going to just be on the backside of that glycemic roller coaster for a longer period of time. And neither of these conditions is conducive to good decision making. Allergic foods, okay, there's wheat, gluten, artificial dyes, sweeteners, dairy foods, and a lot of other things that you could be allergic to. Not everybody is allergic. Some people don't know they are allergic. If you eat a big heavy pasta meal, or you eat a lot of bread and bagels, or sweet rolls, and all of a sudden you get a bloated stomach, get a little indigestion, or you feel really tired, you could be allergic to gluten, because gluten is in all those things. You could seek out some gluten-free breads and cookies and pastas and see if that symptoms goes away. But it's no place to have fatigue in an airplane because you have an allergy, and fatigue is one of the key ingredients of allergies besides indigestion. And also, allergies can affect your ability to think. So you have to be very, very careful and start knowing your body. Start looking at yourself and analyzing things. Because you are a pilot, and you are the first thing in the airplane that could cause a critical problem. Now, this is the end of part 1. You can go and get yourself some water, some coffee, and go and, have a little break and come back for part 2 in a few minutes. Welcome back to part 2 of the Human Factors module, the Physiology of Pilot Error. We're going to talk about alcohol for just a short bit of time. 8 hours bottle to throttle. Now, everybody knows that. But do you distinguish whether it's 1 glass of wine, a couple of beers, or whether you went out and had a Super Bowl party and really got hammered the night before? How do you think you're going to fly the next day when you're pretty hungover? This doesn't only apply to you, but applies to other pilots that you may see on a regular basis. They may be exhibiting some sort of next day impairment. These are some of the symptoms that can occur. Talkativeness, decreased attention, impaired judgment, increased reaction time, and the no fear syndrome. Now, if you notice a pilot who's acting a little bit different than he normally does, you might want to go up and say, hey, did you go to the Super Bowl party last night? You may be a little hungover. Would you like someone to go flying with you just to make sure in case something happens that, the hangover is going to get to you? It's very responsible to not only look at yourself when it comes to alcohol, but also to look at some of your fellow pilots. Now we're going to talk about prescription drugs. There's some that are okay and some that are not okay. Aspirin's fine. Darvon, Percodan, and Demerol, absolutely not. Do not go flying if you take those. If you go to the dentist and get a shot to numb your teeth, sure, that's fine. Once, you might not be able to speak really well because your mouth's going to be all swollen and fuzzy, but you can fly with that. On the other hand, if you drink 10 cups of coffee a day, smoke a couple packs of cigarettes, these are excesses that may affect the way your brain processes information. And maybe you should think twice about overindulging in those kinds of substances. Also, talk to your doctor if you have any kind of medications that you're taking, because you have to make sure that they're not going to interfere with your flying performance.
We're going to be at 5,000 in a second.
No, you're at 45 because you're a VFR on top.
Okay. Such that.
Go up to 65. It's clear. I'm going to throw up if you don't settle it out. What kind of a pilot are you anyway?
You should have driven because the weather's going downhill.
I have to see my sister for the last time before she moves to Europe.
We might have to turn around anyway.
You have an instrument rating, You're supposed to fly in bad weather.
We'll never get there.
That isn't an option.
Well, if you let me buy that WASP GPS, I can land with lower minimum, so it's your fault if we miss this approach.
Well, great.
Approach, this is 7458 Victor. I'd like to pick up an IFR to descend below this deck of clouds.
7458 Victor, weather and destination just reported 00. Say your intentions, please.
Oh, great. You couldn't have gotten a little more speed out of this bug. I have to see my sister.
I really don't care about your sister.
Got it here before the fog set in.
I just want to get this bird on the ground.
Just be very, very aware that if you let it get out of hand, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and your performance is going to decline. It's going to lead to an accident if you don't arrest the repercussions of stress. Fatigue, okay? So you're tired. You didn't get enough sleep. Well, that's not the only cause of fatigue. Electrolyte dehydration, we already talked about. Everybody knows hard physical work will make you tired. Food allergies, we talked about. Candida. Candida is a yeast infection of the body. It's normally in the blood, and it will make you tired. There are some supplements you can take to get rid of it, but you have to recognize that this could be the cause of the fatigue. Basically, you'd have to go to a doctor, and they would have to test you, or a nutritionist, and find out if you do have candida. If you eat a lot of sugar, if you eat a lot of high carbs, you could be a candidate for this. This will make you tired. Jet lag, we know that makes you tired. SAD syndrome. You don't realize it, but when the sun goes down early in the northern hemisphere in the winter, and you're indoors all the time and you don't see the sun, you end up having what they call the seasonal affective disorder syndrome, which actually can cause fatigue along with depression. There's psychological stress that can cause fatigue. Nutritional deficiencies. You might want to get tested to see if you have calcium, magnesium, B complex, minerals, or essential fatty acid deficiencies. Toxic metals. These can cause confusion, disorientation, mood swings, and you can see some of the toxic metals that may affect you. Copper, aluminum, mercury. Now, other sources, we already talked about aspartame. This can help make you tired. Teeth infections. A lot of people don't realize that if you get an infected tooth, it goes systemic. You can get all sorts of symptoms that may have nothing to do with the organ. It's just because your teeth are infected. One of those is fatigue. Spinal misalignments can put stress on the body and make you tired. Electromagnetic stress, if you don't know what electromagnetic stress is, it's the fields that are coming out of electrical and electronic appliances. They are foreign to the body. The body goes and tries to remodulate them so that it can harmlessly pass through the body, and in doing so it gets tired. So this is something you should recognize if you sit next to the computer for a long period of time, if you use a cell phone for a long period of time. This may affect you, so you ought to think twice about getting yourself back in shape and staying away from those before you actually get in the airplane. Gives your body a little bit of time to recoup. Okay, here's what fatigue looks like. Degradation of attention, lack of coordination, impaired coordination, decreased ability to communicate, irritability, poor communication, fixation on tasks, slow reaction time, microsleeps. You may not know what microsleeps are. A lot of airline pilots get microsleeps, and sometimes they don't even know that they've gone to sleep. These are 2-minute little naps that say if you're at altitude and you're droning on with the autopilot on, you're heading into the sun late in the afternoon, you've been up all day, you had a big lunch, and oh man, you're really fighting to stay awake. All of a sudden, boom, a couple minutes goes by, you may not have even known you were asleep. But these are microsleeps, and a lot can happen when you're taking one of these microsleeps. Forgetfulness and inconsistent performance. Now, acute and chronic fatigue, this builds up over time. You may not know that you're getting acute or chronic fatigue. You may just think didn't get a lot of good night's sleep or whatever, but the big thing is that your performance is going to start degrading. And it's in tunnel vision. You're going to be focused on that magenta line and that GPS and forget to look outside to see if there's anybody that could run into your airplane. Chronic fatigue stems from sustained psychological stress or physical conditions such as gluten intolerance. Now, here's some of the symptoms that are listed. Headache, weakness, heart palpitations. Heart palpitations. Do you think you're going to lose your medical because maybe you're having a heart condition? So you run to the doctor? Well, notice that this is a condition of sustained fatigue. So tell the doctor, say, look, I haven't slept a lot, I'm under a lot of stress, I'm tired all the time. They will look at the heart palpitations and say, maybe you ought to relax, go on vacation, whatever. But it may not be an actual heart condition. It may be triggered by acute fatigue. One of the things you don't realize is that if you're fatigued, it's the same as having alcohol in your body. 20 hours awake is a 10% blood alcohol level. You may not test positive for alcohol in your blood, but you may be reacting exactly the same way. It's very, very important to understand this. Now, of course, the FAA recommends not to fly if you have acute fatigue because they recognize that they don't care how much you've been trained or how much experience you have. If you are tired, you're not going to be there in toto. You're going to be having your performance that's going to deteriorate, and you are at risk for having an accident. Circadian rhythms. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's your body clock. And if you come back from Europe, if you come back from Asia, you probably get jet lag. Sometimes you get jet lag just going from coast to coast in the U.S. Your body has a hard time readjusting to time zones. So these are some of the reactions that you're going to get. Okay? Your mood's going to change for one thing. You're going to get mad. You're going to get irritable. You're going to get obnoxious. 5 times more attention lapses. You're going to say, oh, well, apathy, I don't care. Weather, what weather? Judgment decision's going to go down. Your memory's going to go away. Communication's going to have problems. So what you have to realize is that if your circadian rhythm is interrupted, maybe you ought to get back on track before you fly. Because even though you can fly well, if something happens and there's emergency, you're going to be a little bit behind the 8 ball and you may not make the right decision. Now, our circadian low spots are from 4 to 6 a.m. and 2 to 4 p.m., which is why a lot of us want to take a nap in the afternoon. But not everybody's like this. You could be, but not all people are like that. Other factors we're going to discuss right now: motion sickness, carbon monoxide, hypoxia, hyperventilation, the bends at altitude, and aerotoxic syndrome, which is something you probably never heard of. Now, motion sickness and vertigo, here's the symptoms. I'm sure everybody has had some sort of motion sickness sometime, whether it's in a car, in a boat, even in an airplane. Vertigo, if you've been on any aerobatics and stuff, you've probably gotten vertigo at one time, especially if you flew just after getting over a cold. I had an experience once. I was flying a Twin Otter for a commuter, and it was night, it was my leg, it was IFR, and we had no autopilot in the Twin Otter. All of a sudden I swore that the airplane was in a right bank. I looked at the instruments, said, nope, we're straight and level. But my whole body said the instruments were wrong, and we were in the right bank. Now, I couldn't tell the other pilot because he might go back to the personnel department and say she had a problem in the airplane and maybe they were going to fire me or take me off of flying status. So I toughed it out. I used my eyes. I just believed my eyes. I didn't say anything to anybody, and eventually it passed. So if you do get vertigo in the airplane, put it on autopilot if you have an autopilot. If you don't have an autopilot, you have someone sitting in the right seat, just say, could you hang on to the yoke for just a minute and just show them, what to do, and sit there and just look at the instruments. Get yourself straight and level, look at the instruments and believe the instruments and wait till it passes. Now, here's carbon monoxide. You're all well aware of carbon monoxide. You know you're going to die from carbon monoxide poisoning. How many people have a carbon monoxide detector in their airplane? When I ask this question in my live seminars, I'd say probably 80% of the people say, yeah, they do. When I ask them how many people have one in their home, maybe 40%. And actually, you'll have a better chance of dying in your home from carbon monoxide than you will from the airplane. Now, even if you have one in the airplane, you got to look at it. A lot of people put it there and it's there and it's been there for a long time. And it's like one of those things that you just don't pay attention to because you've seen it before. It's always there. You have to look, and you have to look when you're flying to make sure that that thing doesn't change color. It's not going to change color on the ground before you start the engine. So you have to look at it while you're flying. One of the first symptoms is a headache. You start getting a headache in an airplane. When you haven't had a headache before, you better think that something in the airplane is causing it. Best thing to do is to try to open a window. If you can get a window open, turn off the heater, try to get some fresh air in the cabin and get yourself on the ground. Okay, hypoxia, same look at headache. Start getting a headache, you might get the same thing, uh-oh, I got a headache, something's wrong in the airplane. Lots of times you'll get blue fingernails or lips. Most people I know wouldn't look at their fingernails or their lips. But if they are in a pressurized airplane, they're flying, a TBM or a Pilatus or any kind of King Air, they might know that, geez, if they start feeling woozy and get a headache, just look at your fingernails. Your fingernails are turning blue. You better realize that the pressurization isn't working and you've got to get back on the ground. Here are all the symptoms that you can get. What happens with hypoxia is you usually get an I don't care attitude. You get very euphoric. You think everything's okay. You may start making some wrong decisions. There was a King Air not too long ago that took off, and a single pilot, IFR day, very bumpy, autopilot intermittent, took off, climbed up to 20,000 feet. Because of his distraction with the autopilot and the turbulence, he missed the pressurization check at 10,000 feet. What had actually happened is the squat switch that goes from the ground to the flight mode to allow the pressurization to kick in was malfunctioning. So the airplane never pressurized. Now he's at 20,000 feet and he's fat and happy. He doesn't have a care in the world. But he started looking at the GPS, and for some reason he misread the GPS, thinking he had 100-knot headwind. So he asked center to descend. Once he got to 14,000 feet, all of a sudden he came to and realized that his pressurization wasn't working. If he hadn't misread that instrument, he probably would have died and the airplane would have run out of fuel and crashed. Very, very important. Of all the things in a pressurized airplane as a single pilot to look for is look at that pressurization and make sure you don't skip over it on the climb check. Now, hyperventilation, this is basically you're causing your own hypoxia. You're all stressed out, you got an emergency, something's happening, the weather's down, it's really bumpy. You start huffing and puffing and breathing really quickly because you're under stress. You're going to get these kinds of symptoms: dizziness, hot, cold sensations, blurred vision, rapid heartbeat. That happens and you're by yourself. put the airplane on autopilot you have, or just focus straight and level, tell center you want a heading. You just need to work some things out. Fix on that heading, don't worry about anything else, and start breathing slowly, calming yourself down. It's extremely important because the more that this goes on, the less you're going to be able to think properly. Here's the bends at altitude. I guess some really rocket ship type of pilots that fly these fast airplanes that can get up to 20,000 feet without stopping might know about this, but the rest of us may not. The body needs time to adjust, and just like when you're scuba diving, you need to step climb back up to the surface to get the nitrogen bubbles out of your body, out of your blood. Same thing happens in an airplane. If you zoom right up to 20,000 feet, being on oxygen, your body still may not have time to acclimate. So what we advise, if that's the case, is either put your oxygen mask on before you start your engines and just keep it on, and so your body adjusts, for taxi, or step climb, because this is very, very dangerous. You get to 20,000 feet, and if you have the bends, you could die. And that's not going to be really good for your airplane, because it's going to come down and make a big hole in the ground. Here's another one, aerotoxic syndrome. I don't know how many of you people have ever heard of this. If you're flying in turbine or jet aircraft, you might smell a wet dog in your airplane or see a blue haze. Well, that is organophosphate, which is OP. It's the bad stuff, we call it the bad stuff, used as fire retardant to extend engine life. Now, you turn the bleed air on, and all of a sudden, the stuff that's mushing around in there that maybe got loose is coming into your cabin. It can cause all sorts of problems, with your body, but mostly for pilots, it's going to start affecting your brain. Your focus and your concentration will lapse. This is a very dangerous situation. It won't kill you, but you might not be able to think. So that's going to be very detrimental to your performance in the airplane. Best thing to do, if you smell this, turn the bleed air off, get on the ground, call maintenance. If you've been in an airliner and this happens, wait for a little bit to fly your airplane. You've got to get this stuff out of your body. Okay, the last slide in this segment is not what you see. How many times has the center called out traffic, and you look and you look and you look, 2 o'clock, 3 miles, you look, 1 o'clock and 1 mile, and you look, and you still can't see him. And then he says clear traffic, and you're like, oh my God, I never even saw this guy. Part of the problem is the fact that you're scanning back and forth and back and forth. You're not giving your eyes a chance to focus. 1% of your vision, the central retina, is the only part of your eye that can actually focus and see that airplane. So now you must move your head or your eyes just in like little 10 to 15 degree pie slices and wait for a couple seconds. Then take another pie slice, then wait for a couple seconds, and keep doing this back and forth through the segment of area where you're supposed to be seeing the traffic. Also, look out to what you think might be 2 miles to try to get your eyes to focus. If you just sweep back and forth, by the time you've seen the airplane, it's not going to make an impression in your brain because your eyeballs have gone by it. This is a really interesting technique, and you ought to try it. This is the end of the Human Factors segment of our Single Pilot Resource Management course.